Have you ever trusted someone so completely, so deeply, that when they break that trust, it feels like your whole world shifts beneath your feet? Like a cold wind that sneaks in through the cracks and leaves you exposed and vulnerable? That's exactly how I felt, raw, betrayed, and utterly blindsided. My name's Sophie, and after 12 years working as a contractor, I thought I knew what it meant to be professional, to be reliable, to be respected. I was wrong. This is the story of how a simple, seemingly harmless agreement about breakfast tacos, of all things, shattered everything I thought I understood about trust and fairness. The place where I was sent to work was so remote, so isolated. It felt like it was dropped on the edge of the world. A county facility tucked away in a place where the roads disappear into endless stretches of wilderness, and the closest town might as well have been on another planet. There were no restaurants, no corner stores, nothing that could offer a quick meal or a breath of normalcy. Everyone there, myself included, was caught in the grinding cycle of long hours, tough work, and gnawing hunger. I could see it on the faces of the staff. They were tired, worn down not just by the job, but by the constant struggle just to get through the day. It wasn't fair. They deserved better. I wanted to do something small, something human, to remind them that they mattered. So I decided I would bring breakfast tacos twice during the week. Not just for myself, but for everyone. It was a small kindness, warm, filling food to start the day, but in that place, it felt like a lifeline. Of course, I couldn't do it for free. Those tacos cost money, and money is always tight when you're contracting. So, I proposed a deal to my boss, a simple, straightforward trade. I would pay for the tacos, a little over $100, and in exchange, I would be granted free access to the company's photocopy machine for the duration of the project. That machine was crucial. Copying costs could add up fast, and free access would save me a lot in expenses. I called my boss. I laid out the plan, hoping for a little understanding. I expected some back and forth, maybe even a little hesitation. Instead, his reply was almost too casual, too quick. "Sounds reasonable," he said. "Just keep the receipts. No emails, no contracts. Just a verbal nod and a handshake over the phone." I felt relieved, hopeful, even. For once, something simple, something fair. I took it at face value. For the next week, I woke up early twice, drove miles to the nearest town, picked up those tacos, and delivered them to the tired, grateful faces of the staff. I saved every receipt, every credit card statement. I kept track of everything because even when you trust someone, you have to be smart. And then, when the project ended, when I did what I was supposed to do and submitted my expenses, the world fell apart. My reimbursement was flat out denied. No apology, no explanation, just a blunt no. I called my boss. I reminded him of what he said, the deal we made. And his response? "You should have gotten it in writing." Those words hit me like a blow. Not because of the money, though losing over $100 was frustrating, but because of what they meant, the betrayal, the dismissal, the complete disregard for my integrity, for the simple promise we made. It felt like a punch to the gut, like being erased from the equation altogether. Like I was nothing more than a line item to be cut, a cost to be avoided. I finished the project, of course. Professionalism demanded it. But inside, I was boiling with anger, disbelief, and a growing sense of resolve. How could someone I worked with for years treat me like this? How could my word mean so little when I had honored mine fully? That broken promise lingered in my mind. It haunted every photocopy I made afterward, every dollar I paid out of pocket. But more than that, it ignited something inside me, a fierce determination not to be taken advantage of again. Months later, that same boss called me again. Another project, bigger, more demanding, the chance to prove myself all over again. My first instinct was to say no, to walk away. But I needed work. I needed the money. After some negotiation, I agreed. But deep down, I knew things had changed. Trust once broken isn't something you just fix with an email or a handshake. It's a wound, a scar. And this time, I wasn't going to let it go without standing up for myself. Because sometimes, the smallest betrayals teach us the hardest lessons and push us to become stronger than we ever imagined. After the project was finally wrapped up, I thought I could finally breathe a little. I had put in my sweat and hours, endured the isolation and the harsh conditions of that remote location. I'd done more than my job. I'd tried to make things better for everyone around me, even in the smallest way. With those breakfast tacos, it felt good to be more than just a contractor grinding through the motions. I felt connected to the people there, to the project, to something bigger than myself. So, when the time came, I carefully gathered every single receipt, every credit card statement, meticulous proof of the money I had spent. I double-checked everything, making sure nothing was missing. I wanted to be beyond reproach. After all, my boss had agreed over the phone to reimburse me for the cost. This was more than an expense report. It was about honoring a promise, about respect and trust in the work relationship. I submitted my expenses with a quiet confidence, expecting a routine approval. After all, the deal was simple, the numbers straightforward. But then, nothing. Days passed, then weeks. I heard nothing back. No confirmation, no updates. Just silence. A growing knot of unease began to form in my stomach. Finally, when I did get a reply from the finance department, it wasn't what I expected. It was worse. The reimbursement was flat out denied. No reason, no explanation. Just a terse message saying the expense wouldn't be covered. I read those words again and again. It felt surreal, like a bad dream. How could this be happening? How could the agreement my boss made, the one that had seemed so clear and fair, mean absolutely nothing when it came time to pay up? I wasn't the kind of person to blow things out of proportion. I'm professional. I'm reasonable. So, I picked up the phone and called my boss. I reminded him of our conversation, of the deal we had made, and how I'd fulfilled my part. I told him about the receipts, the costs, and the goodwill I had tried to create for the team. His response was like a cold slap across my face. "You should have gotten it in writing," he said dismissively, as if our entire agreement was nothing more than an informal chat that could be ignored at will. No empathy, no apology, just a corporate shield hiding behind bureaucracy. In that moment, I felt small, insignificant, like I was being erased from the story altogether. The respect I had expected, the trust I'd given, vanished in a single sentence. It was as if my efforts, my loyalty, and my honesty counted for nothing. I wanted to argue, to plead, to make him see the human side of the situation. But the anger boiling inside me was tempered by years of experience, the knowledge that fighting someone in his position was a battle I probably couldn't win, at least not in that moment. So I swallowed my frustration, kept my voice calm, and tried to explore any way to resolve the issue. But he was firm. The policy was the policy. Without written proof, he couldn't authorize the expense. The verbal promise that had been the foundation of our deal was suddenly worthless. I was left holding the bill, over $100 gone from my pocket, no compensation in sight. The injustice of it all burned deep. It wasn't just about the money, though, that sting was real enough. It was the betrayal. The feeling that after years of dedication and hard work, I was disposable. That my trust had been treated like a joke. But life moves on. The project wasn't going to finish itself. So despite the bitterness and the hurt, I put on my professional mask, pushed the anger deep down, and kept working. Long nights, grueling hours, remote isolation. I delivered everything I promised and more. But inside, the wound remained raw. Every time I thought about the tacos I'd bought, the effort I'd put in, the goodwill I'd tried to build, I felt a painful knot of disappointment. I realized that sometimes, loyalty and honesty aren't enough to protect you from being taken advantage of. That experience changed me. It made me see the cracks in what I had believed about trust and fairness in the workplace. But it also planted a seed of resolve, a fierce determination to never be treated that way again. Looking back now, I understand that this moment, painful as it was, taught me to stand firmer, to demand respect, and to protect myself better. But at the time, all I felt was the cold sting of betrayal and the weight of injustice pressing down on me like a heavy stone. Several months had slipped by since the bitter fallout over the taco reimbursement. I thought the wound had started to heal, that I could finally set that painful chapter aside and focus on the work I was passionate about. But sometimes, life has a cruel way of forcing you back into the ring, to face the same demons you thought you'd left behind. That day began like any other, but my phone call from my boss shattered the fragile calm I'd been clinging to. When his name flashed on my screen, a rush of conflicting emotions flooded me: apprehension, anger, hope, and something like cautious curiosity. I swallowed hard and answered. He didn't beat around the bush. "Sophie, are you free? We've got a new project coming up. It starts the 1st of next month. It's high stakes, intense, nights, weekends, every minute counts. This is a new client. They want us to blow them away, and they're counting on all hands on deck." His tone was urgent, commanding, as if the whole weight of the company rested on my shoulders. But underneath that urgency, I detected the same vague promises and ambiguous assurances that had led me into trouble before. Still, I listened carefully. The offer was tempting, the paycheck was good, the challenge exciting, but the memory of that 100 I'd been stiffed on those tacos I'd bought out of pocket was fresh and raw. My trust had been broken, and my respect for the boss severely shaken. I felt the old knot tighten in my chest. Could I really say yes again? Could I put myself in a position where I might be taken advantage of, dismissed, or disregarded once more? The risk was high, but the opportunity to prove myself was undeniable. I steeled myself, my voice firm and measured. I told him that if I was going to commit, everything needed to be crystal clear: no more verbal agreements, no more promises that evaporate into thin air when inconvenient. Every detail, every expectation, every expense had to be documented, signed, and acknowledged. No exceptions. He hesitated for a moment, the weight of my demand settling between us over the phone. Then he gave a half-hearted agreement, promising the paperwork would be sent soon. But the way he said it, the vagueness, the casual dismissal, made it clear this was more a formality than a true commitment. I hung up feeling a swirl of emotions, anticipation tangled with anxiety, hope shadowed by distrust. This project would demand every ounce of my energy: nights, weekends, deadlines that would stretch me to my limits. But this time, I promised myself, I wouldn't let anyone walk over me. Yet beneath that promise lurked an uneasy truth. Once trust is fractured, it never fully mends. There's always a crack, a shadow, a lingering doubt that colors every interaction. I was walking into this new chapter, carrying the weight of that broken trust like a silent, heavy burden. I braced myself for what was to come, for the challenges, for the betrayals, if they were to happen again, for the moments when I might have to fight not just for my paycheck, but for my dignity, my respect, and my sense of self. This was more than just a new project. It was a test, a crucible that would push me to my limits, force me to confront my fears and my strengths. The calm before the storm, a fragile moment where hope and skepticism collided, where every decision carried weight beyond the work itself. I was ready, or at least, I told myself I was. Ready to take on the challenge, ready to stand firm, ready to rewrite the story on my own terms. Just a few days before the new project was supposed to kick off, I found myself overwhelmed with a storm of emotions I hadn't expected to revisit. Sitting alone in my small, dimly lit apartment, I stared blankly at my phone screen. The cold glow cast shadows across my face, mirroring the chill that had settled deep inside my chest. Months ago, when my boss first called about this new assignment, a flicker of hope had ignited inside me the possibility of a fresh start, an opportunity to prove myself again. But that hope had been crushed under the weight of broken promises, disrespect, and the haunting memory of 100 I'd spent from my own pocket on breakfast tacos. It wasn't about the money anymore, or at least it shouldn't have been. It was about something far more fundamental: respect, trust. Feeling truly valued for the work I put in, the sacrifices I made, the countless hours I dedicated to projects in some of the most remote, unforgiving locations. I was loyal, dependable. I showed up, no matter the conditions. But that loyalty seemed invisible now, dismissed casually, as if it was owed and not earned. The taco incident became the symbol of that dismissal, a test I hadn't known I was taking. I'd bought those 2 rounds of breakfast tacos for the staff, trusting that my boss's verbal approval meant I would be reimbursed. But when I submitted the receipts, the payment was refused. When I called to remind him, his response cut deep. "You should have gotten it in writing." Those words echoed in my mind like a slap to the face, a dismissal of my effort and my dignity. And here I was again, days before this new project was to start, wrestling with a decision that felt heavier than any before. Should I swallow my pride and take the project, risk being hurt again? Or should I stand my ground and say no, even if it meant burning a bridge I wasn't sure I could rebuild? The tension in my chest tightened. I stared at my phone, fingers trembling as I dialed his number. Each ring felt like a countdown to confrontation. When he answered, his voice was casual, almost too casual, like this was just another routine call. "Sophie," he said, "are you ready for the new project? It starts the 1st of next month. Big client. We need all hands on deck nights, weekends, the works." My heart pounded. But this time, I was ready. I steadied my voice and said firmly, "Actually, I won't be able to take on the project after all." There was a stunned silence, thick with disbelief. Then his voice erupted, sharp and angry. "What? You agreed to this weeks ago? You committed? We've made plans based on your word." I let the silence linger before responding, letting each word hit with deliberate weight. "You should have gotten it in writing." The phrase hung in the air, a razor-sharp reminder of how I'd been dismissed before. The irony was almost delicious. That sentence, once thrown at me to dismiss my rightful claim, had become my armor. On the other end, a heavy silence settled. He sputtered, frustration clear. "You can't just back out now. We need you. The client is counting on us. This project is critical." I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. "I gave you my time, my energy, and my trust," I said, voice steady but resolute. Trust isn't a one-way street. When it's broken, it's not just money that's lost, it's respect. And I refused to be disrespected. His frustration grew, but I refused to budge. "I'm not trying to burn bridges," I continued, "but I have to protect my integrity. That means standing up for myself even if it means walking away." Another long pause. I could almost see his face flushed with anger, disbelief, maybe even a hint of regret. Yet no words could shake my conviction. Before ending the call, I added one last line, a quiet jab, dry humor cutting through the tension. "Next time, maybe start with a contract instead of verbal promises. Saves everyone a lot of trouble." Then the line went dead. I sank back into my chair, breath catching in my throat. The tension I'd carried for months began to unravel, replaced by a strange sense of liberation. That phrase, "You should have gotten it in writing," was no longer just a comeback. It was my sword, my shield. It sliced through the tangled mess of broken promises, empty words, and dismissive attitudes with surgical precision. I thought about all those long nights, the overtime, the sacrifices made silently and unseen. The taco reimbursement wasn't about the money. It was about how casually my effort was dismissed, how easily my worth was undermined. Now, I was reclaiming that worth. Walking away wasn't easy. It meant lost income, risking reputations, maybe even burning bridges that might never heal, but it was necessary. That day, I learned a bitter truth. Strength doesn't come from blind loyalty or endless compromise. It comes from knowing when to say no, from choosing dignity over convenience, self-worth over empty words. As I finally put down the phone, a quiet peace settled over me. No longer would hollow promises or dismissive attitudes define me, because respect, once lost, is almost impossible to regain. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't rage or retaliation. It's walking away with your head held high, your heart unbroken, and your integrity intact. After that final phone call ended, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of weeks, maybe months, finally begin to lift off my shoulders. For a moment, there was silence, an almost surreal stillness that allowed me to truly absorb what had just happened. I had done it. I had stood up. I had fought back not with rage or anger, but with calm, calculated clarity. The victory was mine, But it was far more than just about the 100 I'd spent on breakfast, tacos, or the frustration of having my receipts rejected. That money was insignificant compared to the deeper wounds of disrespect and dismissal. This experience had taught me a crucial lesson, one that I wish I had learned earlier in my career, and one I want to share with everyone who might find themselves in similar shoes. The lesson is simple, yet powerful. Never rely on verbal agreements alone. In the professional world, especially in contracting or freelance work, trust without documentation is fragile. Too fragile, as I found out. Words can be twisted, promises forgotten, and agreements ignored. A handshake or a phone call simply doesn't cut it anymore. I realized the importance of transparency and clarity. Having a contract, an email confirmation, or any form of written approval isn't just about following bureaucratic rules. It's about protecting yourself. It's about safeguarding your time, your energy, your effort, and ultimately, your dignity. Without these protections, you leave yourself vulnerable to situations where your hard work can be dismissed with a casual, "you should have gotten it in writing." That phrase, once thrown at me like a barb, became my rallying cry. It symbolized the turning point in my story. The moment I stopped being a passive participant and became an empowered advocate for myself. When I repeated it back to my boss during our last conversation, it wasn't just an echo of his own words. It was a reminder that I had learned the rules of the game, and I wasn't going to be played anymore. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you have to be confrontational or unprofessional. Sometimes, the smartest approach is subtlety combined with unwavering confidence. My calm, deliberate response not only shut down the boss's anger, but also turned the tables in a way that was both satisfying and a little bit humorous. It was a quiet, clever form of revenge that didn't burn bridges, but instead laid down clear boundaries. This kind of empowerment is what everyone deserves in their professional life. Whether you're an employee, a freelancer, or a contractor, your work deserves to be respected, compensated, and recognized not just with money, but with honesty and fairness. And if you ever feel that respect slipping away, don't hesitate to protect yourself. Insist on clarity. Insist on documentation. There's a misconception that standing up for your rights might make you difficult or uncooperative. But the truth is, knowing your worth and insisting on fairness makes you a professional who values integrity, and that's something employers and clients should respect. The irony is that sometimes, the very people who try to dodge responsibility with vague promises or verbal agreements might learn their lesson only after facing someone who refuses to be pushed around. My story, while personal, reflects a broader reality. Professionalism demands transparency, and respect is earned not just by showing up, but by being clear about expectations and agreements. I also learned that it's okay to walk away when the deal isn't right, even if it's painful. Walking away isn't always a defeat. Sometimes, it's the strongest statement you can make. It says, "I know my worth, and I will not settle for less." That realization gave me peace and a renewed sense of confidence. So, to anyone out there watching this, whether you're just starting your career or you've been in the game for years, remember this. Protect yourself. Demand clarity. Get things in writing. Don't rely on promises that vanish into thin air. Because when you do, you protect not just your paycheck, but your self-respect and your professional future. And to the bosses and clients who might hear this, understand this simple truth. Respect isn't just given. It's earned through fairness, honesty, and transparency. When you honor your agreements and value the people who work with you, you build trust that lasts. When you don't, you risk losing good people, and sometimes, the smart ones will walk away with a phrase or two that will haunt you in the most satisfying way. In the end, the story of the breakfast tacos and the rejected receipts isn't just about a few dollars. It's about dignity. It's about standing your ground with intelligence and grace. It's about knowing that your value is not negotiable. And sometimes, that value is best defended with a sharp phrase, a little humor, and a firm refusal to be undervalued. So remember, next time you're offered a verbal agreement, think twice. Make it official, because in the world of work, the pen truly is mightier than the word.